Taj Hotels and Oyo, where will you invest? As an angel, I will invest in Oyo because that's my maximum return. I got 280x kind of return. The guy built everything from scratch, a young entrepreneur built everything from scratch, a $10 billion, and ended up buying all the stakes from a VC. While he's going to do an IPO, how it happens across, that's a different story. But somebody young, without capital, would he been able to create this kind of value? It wouldn't have been there. So how do you deploy capital is going to be very, very, very important, right? Unless you plan a right consumption of capital and right metrics, the businesses will flounder. And secondly, while Asim mentioned across about saying your genuineness, about ability to face an investor, right, and return the capital back. I have invested, and many of other my colleagues as a VC, we invest into the same founder again with a newer idea. I believe it is the idea which has failed, not the founder. Because ideas can fail, that's fine, and that's a part of journey. But we'll back the same founder again and again because we know he has put in the right work, and that's where the capital comes at play, right? So idea is the use of capital, as Asim mentioned, is very, very important.
Absolutely. But I'm equally enthused about the other way of building a business as well, which Parag sir did say that, without raising a capital. And, in past couple of months, we've seen the example of Haldirams go around on social media, how they've gone on to build, the entrepreneur has gone on to build this huge chain. So what do you have to guide people? Let's say if they don't want to raise capital and they want to bootstrap and start from scratch.
I always tell students one thing. I tell them there is a cost of not going to the venture capital. The cost is you could spend that time in front of your customer and actually close a deal with them. Instead of spending time making so many pitches, spend that time in front of your customer. You learn a lot more. That's one way of looking at it. Otherwise, there are several companies even in the fintech sector which are doing well without raising a rupee of funding. Outgrow.com, I am told, is doing well. Outgrow.com is doing very well.
Outgrow.
So there are several companies that are doing well without having raised capital. So I always tell them that build a small prototype, test it out in the market, find out the response, build, measure and learn. And keep on refining your products till you are very sure that the market is ready to accept. Then launch it. Soft launch it. Don't launch it in a very big. You scale up on its own. Let it grow organically. That's my advice.
I'm sure some of the founders that come to you, even the small enterprises, they share this opinion and this thought process. And do you also encourage, or are you also seeing, a hybrid mode of fundraising going on a little bit, alternative funding, a bit of VC funding? What are you observing? I'm sorry, the question was for him.
So in terms of the current funding scenario that we are seeing, a lot of companies in consumer space or companies that are heavily funded also are looking to make sure that their dilution is also not to a large extent. So then, as Shifali rightly highlighted, the way they fund, if they park $10-15 million of fund for a total round, they keep 10 million for the equity round and another 5 million for a non-dilutive capital equity, so the dilution is capped at one stage. That's number one. And number two, it's not necessary for the founder, or it's not necessary for a company to dilute a large part of the ownership to make sure that the company scales. So there's a certain amount. So the way the metrics works is, if there is 1x put into advertising and 3x is the returns, and through the growth funding or through the debt funding, if 1x is put in, then 6x would be the returns, and that would help them grow to a larger scale, which will help them dictate the valuations at the higher stage, so that the scale of the company increases at a at a huge scale.
Okay. Asim sir, I want to come back to you. So you've been on the other side as a banker, as a lead banker in the country, and you've given loans to people, not easy money, but loans for different segments. Commercial vehicles, loan against properties, and so many others, business loans. What is that one, or what is the fundamental, the core of giving money to somebody? What is it that you look at when someone is building a business?
So banking is the most stupid business in the world because you are taking equity risk for debt returns. In a venture business, you can say, okay, I'm giving money to 100 companies. If 10 make it, I'm very happy. 90 go, I don't care. Because what makes it gives you multi-X. In banking, when you lend, if you do it right, you'll only get your interest and principal back. If you do wrong, one mistake, and you lose the principal. So the tolerance for error is zero. Now, when you have such low tolerance of error, I mean, at HDFC Bank, our tolerance of error was 80 basis points. So if I'm lending, I'm not allowed to lose more than 80 basis points of the lending that I do, which basically means that even 1 in 100 can't go wrong. Now, when you are doing that, your whole approach is very different. Therefore, people then blame banks for being conservative, for asking for collateral, etc. But where does it come from? It comes that you are protecting public money. You don't have a right to make calls saying, okay, it's okay, this guy is trying, we'll put money and see. If it comes, otherwise it goes. You can't take that approach. So the business is very different, and therefore it will be conservative. But at the end of it, there are only two things in whether it's banking or whether it is in investing. There are only two things. You look at ability and you look at intention. It doesn't go beyond these two things. On ability, you look, as a banker, you would look at a company's cash flows, you look at a company's business model, you look at a company's debt equity ratios, you look at a company's interest coverage ratios, you'll do those boring stuff. As an investor, you do the same thing based on projected ability. Saying, do you think that this guy has the ability to carry off this idea, to scale it, to sustain it? So there, a banker more looks at your past track record for obvious reasons. An investor will look at your future possibilities and bet on that. But basically, he's doing the same. Both are doing the same thing. And the second thing is intention. Ability may be perfect, but if intention is wrong, then your money is never going to come back. So then you look at the intention of the borrower, and the same thing the investor would do probably. What is the intention? What is the purpose? What is the goal? And as Buddha said, ultimately purpose drives all outcomes. If the purpose of the founder is to build an institution, he builds it differently. If the purpose is to enrich himself, he will build it differently.
So Rohit, Asim sir said, he shared his experience as a banker, that how conservative they have to be while giving loans. And you are in the field of this might be slightly tricky or tough for you to answer, but you are in the space of education loans, right? And that space, as per my understanding, bankers have been very wary of giving education loans, and now we have a lot of fintechs which have come up to serve the students and the parents to meet the need. But again, the fundamentals of the space, I'm being a bit specific here because you are driving that space. So what do you have to say about it? Because a lot of students, they should not, nobody should, but a lot of students default on their loans. So that has been the history. So many banks over the past couple of years turned conservative and stopped giving education loans. So what motivated you to get into it, and what are you experiencing? And how are you safeguarding the money basically? How do you ensure that the money comes back?
Kind of asking me my own model. But yeah, so if you look at education loans traditionally before we started, these were two kinds of education loans which were existing. One was the student taking a loan to study abroad or higher grad kind of a loan. The other one is the institution taking a loan, right? So these two are quite popular. But when we came into the education loan space, we thought about it slightly different, because what our belief was that for education, the child has to be in the best shape from the base, from fundamentals, right? So when you're basically giving a loan or removing the financial restriction later in the life of a student, he has already studied most of his part and not gotten best of education, right? So we believe that we need to really strengthen the core part. So we started our education loan in the K-12 space. So our first segment was preschools and kindergarten to 12th, and that was a 1 year kind of a loan. So basically you're just paying your entire year fees in 12 EMIs. So that was slightly different than the other one. The other one was morat based loan, so you had to pay after you get a job, etc. And especially when COVID came in, those two segments were one of the most affected. One is because of the placements that did not happen, so students were not easily able to pay back. The other, school infrastructure, because the schools got shut down, the fee payments got affected, the schools were not able to pay back to the banks. But the model that we operated was basically a simple model where parents are taking the loan. So we kind of diversified and mitigated the risk. So if I had to give, say 5 crores to a school, I actually give it up to around 5,000 parents instead of giving it to one school. So if there are more number of parents who are taking the loan, they have to pay back in 12 installments. How do I safeguard this? Yeah, so this is linked, it's like a zero cost EMI structure. So the way you buy our laptops in zero cost EMI, you can also pay your school or college fees in zero cost EMI. And it's linked to your credit bureau, right? So that's the main aspect area there. The main thing which has worked for us is this loan has a repeat value. So if the parent has taken a loan from us, they pay and they retake it in the following year. Because in a K-12, it's like a 10 to 12 year education. So if they want to avail the facility again, they'll have to clear the previous facility, and hence it did not affect us much, right? And it's a moral obligation for a parent. So this segment was not affected during the COVID time and actually flourished. Whereas there was the other areas which you spoke about were naturally affected because of market conditions itself. If the schools do not get enough money, they were not able to pay. So the morat had to be extended. And same thing with the students who expected they would get placed. Suddenly in that MBA, they were working from home. MBA is all about going to colleges and it's a different form of study. So they were also not getting placed in the kind of jobs that they wanted to. So that is what affected the industry in those 2 years, and it has gotten back in the past year, right? But those were the key reasons which were more market driven. One funny aspect that I came across in the education part when I dealt with a few customers, very funny, very silly as such. When you look at customers taking an loan for purchasing a vehicle, and tomorrow something happens to the vehicle, you still have to pay back your loan, and every customer understands that. But strangely in education, if someone is taking a loan for education and tomorrow if you drop off, the customer said, I'm not taking education now I don't have to pay back the loan.